Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions Podcast Network.
I'm John Lein, and I wasn't actually expecting to die.
Oh my god. So we are nearing the end of Page to Screen Month, but today we're going to be talking about Going Postal. But before we get to that, John, have you been watching anything of note this week?
I actually just finished watching Hector and the Search for Happiness. Back when we did User Submitted Month, my dad suggested it, and you watched it and wrote a review about it.
And I really enjoyed it.
Right, and so I torrented it then, and I just now got around to actually watching it. And it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's
the best of the Simon Pegg, solo films I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Because it's got Simon Pegg comedy in it, but it also has, a message, a sort of moral to the story, whereas a lot of his stories, as a lot of his solo movies that I've seen, focus more tightly on the comedy aspect of it.
Yeah, it's got a message, which is why I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Simon Pegg. I like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost together, but I'll take Simon Pegg if it's just Simon Pegg.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also got Christopher Plummer. And it's got a bunch of people. It's got Jean Reno as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like a South African drug lord.
Yeah, and Stellan Skarsgård.
Stellan Skarsgård. I am the Swedish chef, Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh, man. Stellan Skarsgård as not a murderous asshole like he was in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
And also not a scientist like he was in Thor.
Oh, God, don't remind me. Don't remind me. As for me, I haven't been watching a whole lot. I've been watching the Twitch live stream of the Counter-Strike Go tournament in Germany.
A nerd.
Yes, hardcore nerd, which actually just wrapped up about a couple minutes ago while we're recording this, actually. And the best team in the world won again, big surprise. But, I'm kind of interested in this whole kind of esports as a thing that you can sit and watch. I find it to be a little strange, but at the same time, I understand why it's a thing. But it's definitely kind of coming into its own recently, which is nice. I mean, it's still video games, and video games are still what nerds play, or, Call of Duty, which dick bros play. But, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's interesting, this kind of cult of personality around these gamers. Very similar to the way that that certain sports fans feel about their favorite quarterback or something. So, as for news this week, there wasn't really any of note. The trailer for The Witch came out, which looks awesome. But
The biggest thing I can think of, and I'm not sure if we talked about it on our last one or not, is the cast list for Star Wars.
We did, because Mads Mikkelsen was...
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a Mads Mikkelsen podcast, sort of.
Hannibal, that's right.
By proxy. Mads Mikkelsen by proxy. Which reminded me, Mads Mikkelsen is actually going to be in Toronto in a couple weeks. At the Toronto Fan Expo, where one of our frequent guest co-hosts, Mike White of the Projection Booth, is going to be hosting some Q&A sessions, which is awesome. He's going to be hosting a Q&A session with Orlando Jones and a Q&A session with Danny Trejo.
Nice.
Yeah, right. So if you're in Toronto, you should go check out our friend Mike White doing those. But moving on to the movie at hand, Terry Pratchett's Going Postal. It was a 2-part television adaptation of the book Going Postal, written by Terry Pratchett. The IMDb synopsis is: a con artist is conned into taking the job as Postmaster General in the Ankh-Morpork post office. Ankh-Morpork, excuse me.
I'm offering you a new life. The job in question is to reopen the Ankh-Morpork post office.
It's no one posts anything anymore. It's all clacks, clacks, clacks. Look at it.
Welcome to government service.
I'm the new postmaster.
I am so sorry.
Every message that your post office delivers takes money out of Richard Gilt's pocket. I like that.
Has anyone ever told you how beautiful you look when considering violence?
It features Richard Coyle as Moist von Lipwig, and the kind of other person of real note is Charles Dance, obviously, who would go on to be in Game of Thrones, but he plays Patrician Havelock Vetinari, and it's third in the adaptations that Sky TV has done of Terry Pratchett's novels, the first being Hogfather and the second being The Color of Magic. John, you suggested this.
Yep.
So I'm assuming that you liked it.
Yeah.
Just an assumption, I think it's a safe one.
Terry Pratchett is was probably easily my favorite author.
He can still be, technically.
Well, right. I guess that's true.
Because someone is finishing his last book.
Well, they're just, finishing the manuscript of it.
Well, I also read that his daughter might be continuing his writing as well.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I'd have to check that out. But, he's easily my favorite author. There are other books that I've read that have been maybe more interesting. But the sheer volume of quality stuff that Terry Pratchett put out is pretty mind-boggling if you look at all the Discworld books. And the adaptation of these books from page to the smaller screen, the silver screen.
The smaller screen, because he hasn't had an adaptation to film yet.
Right. So the adaptation of his books from page to the smaller screen in these 2-part miniseries events is a really good way to adapt his books, which are excellent off the bat, and format them with enough truth to the story to do it justice. Because his world has so much going on in it at any one time. I mean, in any one book, you have cameos from characters in other books. You have characters that are in all of them, like Vetinari, played by Charles Dance in this film. You have other, plot points that need to get set up for other books that involve these main characters, but that are still subtle enough that it's not, Marvel Avengers universe beating you over the head with it. And you also have to maintain this air of dry but optimistic humor. There's a lot of flawed characters in Terry Pratchett's universe, but the overall tone of his world is usually pretty optimistic. So it's not, his books.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies. Inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Aren't depressing or anything like that. I just really like the world, and I think Going Postal is one of the better books in the world, and so having it get turned into a movie is a really enjoyable thing for me to see. And I really hope he was planning on starting his own television production company, and they were going to do more miniseries like this, and they were also going to do a television series following the cops of the Discworld, and it was going to be a Terry Pratchett procedural cop drama fantasy thing. And I hope that they are still doing that even though he's passed away.
That was a long answer.
Yeah, I sort of rambled on there for a little bit too.
It's okay. We often ramble about the things we feel passionate about. So I had mentioned earlier that Terry Pratchett passed away and that his daughter is now the kind of custodian of his estate. The final book is coming out August, next week actually. August 27th, the final book, The Shepherd's Crown, is coming out, and there will be no further books. So this is kind of coming right at a kind of monumentous time for the Discworld series. Mm-hmm. I had never read any of the Terry Pratchett books. I had some as a teenager, but I never read them. Just because when you're in school and they force you to read a bunch of books, you don't often get to read what you want. You just have to read what school tells you, and then during the summer you're like, I don't really want to read.
Man, I mean, I read far more books when I was in high school than I have since I got out.
Yeah, no, I've read more now than I did in high school. Well, I mean, when I was in college, I would read during the summers in my free time.
Yeah.
But I mean, in high school, I had nothing. I didn't want to read.
In high school, I was reading personal books like in the middle of class, and teachers would get on my case for reading the books that I brought with me.
Reading the good books as opposed to the shit that they were assigning in school, like fucking Great Expectations, and just. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those books, but let's be honest here. Kids that are in high school aren't going to get anything out of those books. Mm-hmm. We would have gotten more out of reading Going Postal than anything else. Or books that are written by Terry Pratchett. Mm-hmm. Because they have a sly sense of humor that keeps the reader engaged. And that's why I really enjoyed this adaptation. Having never had any experience or, exposure to the Terry Pratchett Discworld, I really liked this. Mm-hmm. Because even though there's kind of like some stuff going on that I wasn't really sure as to what was going on or why, it keeps you engaged with the humor and the characters. And it's also kind of a sly criticism of our society. Mm-hmm. Because the kind of the whole crux of the episodes, the 2 episodes which make up this film, are the character Moist von Lipwig, played by Richard Coyle, being a con man who has to then redeem himself by making the post office what it used to be.
Mm-hmm. In direct competition with the sort of big business capitalist sort of system run by David Suchet playing Reacher Guild.
Right. And he runs the Clacks, which is kind of like, I guess...
a light telegraph?
Yeah, like a telegraph. A precursor to the telephone, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there's these kind of whimsical, magical realism characters, like a machine that is a pumping machine that's actually like a golem robot. There's a bat monster that flies around that kills people. There's a lot going on.
There's a werewolf cop.
Right, the cops are one of the cops is a werewolf.
Mm-hmm. Words are magic.
Yeah, that too. And there's also I guess ghosts at one point. Is that what that is? Those are ghosts. Right?
No, that's so in the Discworld books, there's this sort of standing rule that if you gather enough words together in any one place, the sheer collection of knowledge has enough power sort of latent within itself to warp time and space around it. And so weird things happen. So that's why the post office the letters that have been piling up for decades have the ability to communicate with Moist von Lipwig. In the other books,
that wasn't very well explained.
Yeah, it's just like one little monologue from a wizard character that comes pretty late in the movie. They say why it's happening, but again, it's late in the movie. It's one character. It's like right before the whole place burns to the fucking ground. So it's a little hard to catch. I only really know it because I've read the books so many times, and, every now and then one of the books has to do with that concept specifically.
Yeah, I didn't get that, so that's why I thought it was like ghosts.
Right, because that's what everybody says in the movie it is. They go, oh, the post office is haunted.
Right.
But really it's the words gathered together have enough sort of stagnant power within them to become a sort of sentient collection of thoughts.
Right, and that's what I guess I didn't get that. And again, I feel like having some exposure to the source material probably helps. Mm-hmm. It really helps. But that being said, me having no exposure to the source material, I really enjoyed it. And it's definitely something that I know who I would suggest this to, if that makes sense. I don't think everyone would enjoy this and the comedy style of it. Mm-hmm. Because it's for a specific kind of person.
Right.
It's British humor, and British humor doesn't hit with everybody.
Mm-hmm. And it's set in a fantasy world with golems and trolls and werewolves and dwarves and stuff like that. So you also have to be willing to accept those logic leaps too.
And there's also like steampunk as well. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of the steampunk in the film as well.
Right.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Because he's been writing the books in that world for so long.
And is that all he's written? Is the Discworld series?
He's done... The Discworld series follows a whole bunch of different characters. So there's some Discworld books that take place on one side of the globe, or one side of the disc, dealing with a whole group of characters, and then there's other books that deal with a second group of characters on the other side of their little planet, and then there's other books that have to deal with little gnome characters that live out in the highlands. There's books about one individual in a country far away dealing with the political ramifications of some new discovery of an energy source. There's a book set in the city that Going Postal takes place in that's about a character opening up a movie theater. It's all... Most of his books take place in the Discworld, but the Discworld doesn't all follow one character. It's not like Divergent or The Hunger Games, where every book centers on Katniss Everdeen. It's like, it's a grab bag. You can pick any Terry Pratchett book and read it and probably keep up with what's going on. And then he's also done a few other things. He wrote Good Omens with Neil Gaiman, a few other things like that, collaborations that he's been a part of.
But, he's known for... Discworld is what he's known for.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely... there's like 40, 50 books. I don't know how many exactly.
Right. And I would love to sit down and actually read some of the books. And I have all the audiobooks on my computer. And I'm planning on listening to them.
Once you're done with all the Michael Crichton ones.
Right, which I haven't listened to an audiobook in a couple weeks now. So it'll be a while. But... the thing that I really enjoyed about this movie, Going Postal, was the sense that this is taking place in a world that's not really very much different from our own, which is something that's important when you're being introduced to a new world in fiction. Mm-hmm. Because if it's a world too different from our own, then you kind of get... not confused, but it's overwhelming. And so you get the sense when you watch this film that this is taking place in a world that's not really much different from ours. And I think that helped me to enjoy this. Mm-hmm. Because I was able to be like, oh, okay, I can kind of see where this is going. And, Richard Coyle as Moist von Lipwig is just a super charismatic character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I enjoyed his character a lot.
And, it's interesting that you say that about how sort of grounded in how similar to our world it is, because when I talked to Jon Jones, the director, for the interview that we have for this episode, we talked a lot about how everything in Discworld is exaggerated but gets inspiration from things that are in the world around them. A lot of the architecture that they used in the movie is from buildings in the hometown of Terry Pratchett and Jon Jones himself. And they just sort of exaggerated that architecture style to fit the grander setting of the Discworld.
Right.
And that probably helps. Just the fact that the set and costumes and everything all are connected to things that we do here on Earth.
Well, I mean, like at one point there's a huge kind of part of the film them figuring out how to make stamps.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was the, we're using we're gonna make stamps now, and they figure that out because one of the characters collected pins, like literal pins, and the pin paper was already perforated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and he realized you could tear it faster.
Right. So they started printing the stamps on the pin paper.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's that, like you said, it's kind of realism but exaggerated, and that's what I liked about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like John was mentioning, we spoke with Jon Jones, who directed Going Postal, so we'll play that interview, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about the plot and the characters.
How did you get involved with Going Postal?
I got involved in Going Postal. There was the Mob Films had made a few Terry Pratchett adaptations, 2 Terry Pratchett adaptations, and so when they wanted to make the third one, they were looking for a kind of new voice, I suppose, to take over the creation of that world, and they picked me, I suppose. It was a kind of fun process because they had a bit of a script, a fair amount of a script, but the second part was a shambles, and so I kind of pitched to them and scribbled a lot of drawings for them. And they seemed to like it, so I kind of came on board.
And how did it sort of differ from, how did directing a film based off of a book differ from your other experiences directing?
Well, I'd done quite a lot of adaptation, actually. I'd adapted myself a series of diaries of this very outspoken British politician. And so I was kind of quite steeped in the tradition of adaptation. I suppose in Britain we do quite a lot of it, and I'd done some Austen adaptation and even worked on an adaptation of Anne Frank. So there was a real, it's a very familiar thing, I think, in Britain, because we have all these really good books, and we seem to just mine that seam continually.
Mm-hmm. And had you read much Terry Pratchett before they approached you?
I hadn't, actually. It was kind of curious. I'd read Mort, and had sort of loved that, but it had slightly passed me by, and so when I came across it, I really delved, because Mort in some ways is the more medieval world, if you like, the earlier incarnation of Terry's world, and by the time you're getting into Going Postal, he had sort of grown into the Victorian era in the same way that Discworld had grown into the Victorian world, and so I dived into that and adored it. Actually, I loved. I kind of, so obviously Going Postal was the adaptation, but I got incredibly fixated with the Guards books, which I think Going Postal is one of his best, and I think the Guards books are astonishingly good, and there have been sort of rumblings about trying to make the Guards into films, into TV series, into so on and so forth, but it's, for whatever reason, it's proved very tricky with the rights, tricky with how to do it, that kind of thing, the scale of it. So the short answer is no, but then I soon became very, very acquainted with it.
Excuse me. And how closely did you work with Terry Pratchett while filming?
Well, Terry Terry sort of was... I suppose Terry was the Lord Veterinary of the project, in that, when I came on board, before I came on board, I went to see Terry down in his house, and we met in the local pub. And he just kind of wanted to know that somebody was on board who actually kind of understood his world and liked his world and had the sort of right references. And I'd collected a lot of pictures and drawings and all sorts of things to show him. And I showed him this picture of the post office, the old post office in Dublin. And I said, I think it should look something like this. And he said, that's exactly how I saw it. And after that, we got on very well. I think, so Terry grew up in a place called Beaconsfield in Buckinghamshire. And I actually live very close to Beaconsfield, strangely. And so I was very aware of the kind of higgledy-piggledy nature of how buildings were, and because Beaconsfield's got this extraordinary old town with full of houses with beams and strangeness and crookedy roofs and so on and so forth. It's actually very posh now, but it wasn't. And strange little ponds, and we talked a bit about that, and a sort of common sense of, I suppose, what his vision of the world was as a child growing up and then going forward, and the strangeness of people and the everyday magic and the kind of the land, if you like, because it's very beautiful. It's in a place called Chiltern. It's very beautiful, very agricultural, or was, and I'd had a very kind of very country upbringing. So there was a lot of kind of commonality. I kind of got it, I think. And I loved the way he viewed Britain and the world, and he kind of transposes that into his novels, really. Yeah.
And what were some other ways, you mentioned the buildings and the land, what were some other ways that you sort of translated the feel of the books onto the screen? Because I imagine that would be difficult.
Yeah, well, it was really difficult. And we didn't have very much money. So it was quite I think it's a huge challenge taking on something like Going Postal, because, the books are so wonderfully evocative and vast, and, it's really, in some ways, you can only get part way there in what you do, because we had a designer who also kind of was quite keyed into that world, Terry's world, and he'd worked on the other adaptations and was sort of steeped in it. And we had set dressers who knew the books backwards, and but it was kind of scary because we were very aware we didn't have, the kind of budget that you really want to throw at this kind of vision of the world. So all we could really do was get as close to it in touch and feel as we possibly could, and we shared all these references of the crazy houses in the Chilterns and those post offices and and I suppose the thing is about a lot of Terry's characters, they're based on quite sort of archetypal things, and I had a very clear picture of what postmen should look like. Because when I was a kid, we had this postman, and he was very sweet, and he had this very felted jacket and a cap and, so on and so forth. And that was kind of the brief that I gave the costume designer, and we kind of, because that's what postmen looked like, both in my childhood and I assume probably, in Terry's childhood as well. Very particular, scruffy people with pockets full of letters and dust and all sorts of things. So we would just try and go into all those details. The pin shop was, massive labour of love in terms of how you fetishize, I suppose, pins and how important that is. And it was, the pin shop was one of my favourite sets because we worked very hard on the pin shop because I think Terry did. I think there's a great love of enthusiasts in Terry's books, and I have a great love of enthusiasts. One of his last books, Raising Steam, was really about the love of people who give themselves to a passion, even though the passion seems somewhat extraordinary, like steam trains but those people are very, very blessed, I think, because they they're the lucky ones who kind of have a love for something on this planet, and a almost irrational devotion to something which you think, well, this is all very odd. But when you spend time with avid collectors, whether they be collectors of old toys or old trains or big trains or stamps or there's a sort of real kind of there's something in those people that is adorable because they have passion. And I think, yes, people can laugh at people who get obsessed by, I don't know, whatever it might be, Star Wars toys or stamps or, comics but I think Terry really understood what that gives people and that it's an incredibly positive thing. So the sort of the pin shop became something that was very serious and had to be done beautifully because some people like pins, and there's a lot of pins out there to collect. And I think we all loved those kind of details that Terry loved in his books. So hence Stanley, the pin collector, was he was a joy to do. And of course, the thing about the books is the books are so beautifully detailed, and we all have a vision of what all those sets could be. And all I can really say is we kind of did our best to do the bits that we could, sort of fully in the sort of awareness that those books need more. They need more. I mean, in the mob, there was, like I said, there was a great desire to do more so that you could actually start building this whole kind of world. But it's challenging. The Clacks was another thing. Clacks was fantastic. That was actually, I think, why Terry kind of said, yes, you can, you get the blessing. It was because I sat down and I worked out how the Clacks would work, basically. And it took a bit of time, but it was a joyful thing to work out that you could create a system like you could create the Clack system, which could send messages, how it would send messages backwards and forwards, and how it could send pictures, and how you could code it, how it would work. And those Clacks machines we built, the little ones and the big ones, and they all worked, and they could send messages, literally, and that itself was just something it was a real privilege to actually, get to do that, I suppose. And so we really went heavy on things like the Clacks, talked a lot to Terry about it, made these designs, worked out how they would go backwards and forwards, how they could get jammed, how you could put wrong messages in it. All those kind of things. And to be honest, I could still be working on it now with delight, because there's so much detail that you want to put into it, I suppose. And of course, the trouble with filmmaking, I suppose, is that there's a budget and there's a deadline, and there comes a day when you have to walk out and and do your thing. And of course, the budget we had was the Sky TV budget, which is was the sort of Spider-Man 2 catering budget for a month, sort of thing. So challenging, but.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed you also spent a lot of time on even the sort of background characters. I noticed Otto von Schreck, the vampire photographer, in a few scenes.
Well, that's I think the thing with Terry's world, I suppose, Terry was very keen for us to sort of throw, to keep those little characters going, even though they weren't doing very much. And of course, that's a real challenge, because it's hard to get an actor who who's going to do it justice and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's great with someone like Miss Chris Block. You could really go to town on that. The actress who plays that is actually the actress in, what's that show in America called? Oh my God. About the writers and with Joey from Friends. Anyway, that show. And she's a good friend of mine, so she said, yes, I'll come and do this quite small part as the reporter. But that was all part of the sort of relationship, I think, with Mob Films, actually, that had developed between Mob Films and Terry, of really respecting his books and feeling that each, the films should represent as much of the broad spectrum of it as possible, and to try and get as much in it. And of course, yeah, that's challenging, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, the final look of a lot of films is dependent on the cinematographer. What was it like to work with Gavin Finney?
Gavin's lovely. I've known Gavin for a long time, actually. And it's the interesting thing about, I suppose, doing something like Going Postal on a shoestring is that you have to be very smart about how you do it, because you don't really, I mean, this sounds, I'm not making excuses for this, but in a sense, you don't have the armory that, a big Hollywood feature has. You don't have those resources where you say, okay, well, how do we make this thing fly? Okay, well, we do it this way and that way, and we VFX will do it. But the thing about Gavin is that he was very good he knew a lot about tricks, I suppose. He'd done a fair amount of green screen work, and he had a very good tone. He's just, and he was fast, because we had to do it fast. And he's a real gentleman, actually. He's an adorable guy. He's doing, he's great. He's doing very well. He just did Wolf Hall, which is very dark. He knew what he was doing, I think. So we could sit down and go, okay, so how do we do these shots of the clacks and flying through the air and whatever, without the ability to actually we didn't do very much 3D animation. We just couldn't afford it. So most of our stuff was 2.5D in effect, or cheats. And because he'd been involved in that sort of project before, he was good at cheating. He was great. He had an amazing gaffer as well, who I think we all became quite fond of the whole thing, because we actually filmed it in Hungary, and that in itself was initially quite challenging, but I think we made a lot of friends in Hungary by the end. They all thought we were mad at the beginning, and it was all very challenging. But there's people like Gavin who kind of dig in and make it happen. Along with his camera team and Brandon, who was his gaffer, who was such a trooper. He was actually doing the scaffolding and everything at the beginning, and thinking, oh my God, these Hungarians, I don't even know how to talk to them. And by the end of it, he was kind of meeting their families and going for huge dinners and all sorts of things. Because they've become very close. But I think, there's a good energy on Terry Pratchett's world and worldview and sense of how people are engenders quite a lot of good feelings. I think there's a generosity in the material which to some degree can leak out into a project, I think.
And you mentioned that you had to shoot it quickly. What was the shooting schedule like for it, considering that it's over 3 hours long?
No, here's the thing. I cannot, for the life of me, I can't answer that very well, because it just seemed. What was this? So it's basically, it was initially made for Sky in 2 parts. So that was 90. Yeah, 2 90s it was, wasn't it? And I'm just going to get this wrong. I think we shot for about 8 weeks. Was it 7 or 8 weeks? But of course, there were a lot of elements stuff to shoot, and all sorts of kind of nutty things that we had to shoot. So we were basically going out on a kind of regular TV schedule, and having to bring back all this, all the VFX elements and blah, blah, blah. I had a second unit cameraman who was wonderful, actually, who's called Buddha, who was Hungarian, who would go off, and I'd say, go on, Buddha, go and shoot this little bit here, and in terms of go and get me a smoke element or a water element or a this or a that and whatever. So we were running that at the same time, but we didn't really have a full-on proper VFX team. We had a very good VFX team, but we didn't have a kind of a VFX unit that was who were bringing things up. We did to some degree, but it was all slightly understaffed, shall we say. Although it's a testament to a great team, a very good first AD who would organise this ragtag bunch of people into getting all the appropriate things and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
And as far as the effects are concerned, how did the golem suits work? What went into making them?
Well, we wanted to do that's the thing. We wanted to do a digital golem, and they said no. And we said, okay, we want to do a digital golem, but I'm going to digitally enhance it. No, they said, you can't get it. So we were sort of stuck in many respects. With quite a low tech, something that we can only do as a very low tech thing. And we had this very tall a dancer from, I think it was from Amsterdam, called Marnix, who was mercifully very thin and very tall and very agile, and there was a very good, actually there was a really good sculptor called Ivan Pecharnik, I think, Pecharnik or something, I can't say it properly. And we turned up one day at Ivan's workshop, and he'd been working on Hellboy, I think it was, and he'd done various bits and bobs of, because quite a lot of American shows go through Budapest, like Hellboy and that extraordinary Russian Nutcracker and things like that. And we said, Ivan, can you make us go? And he said, of course. And we said, we've only got this much. And he said, no, I can't. And we said, please. And so he did. But of course, Budapest is an amazingly beautiful, wonderful place. And I have extraordinary memories of Budapest. And one thing about Budapest, though, is that it is extraordinarily hot in the summer. So you put a tall, thin man in a rubber suit in the heat and get him to walk around, and he sort of expires. And Marnix was amazing because he would just keep going, but then we had to create a coolant system in the suit, and that didn't work. And then he collapsed, and then he got up because he refused to collapse, and so. Yeah, it was quite a thing, the going suit, and I guess it was kind of like, we were kind of like doing it like they did Wizard of Oz, in a way. It was an old style technology to it. And I think what's slightly tricky about working on things like this in the modern day is, of course, you look at the Wizard of Oz now and you think, well, of course, that's a man dressed up as a lion, don't be ridiculous. But because of, I suppose, just because, as an audience, you go to the Wizard of Oz and you go, it's the Wizard of Oz, it's kind of, I know what they're talking about. He's lions. It's fine. There's Tin Man. I get it. And we suspend our disbelief and we jump for it. And the tricky thing, I think, now, in a sense, is that our obsession with reality and so people will watch, in the way people watch things now, as they watch them on their computers or however they watch them. So you watch Going Postal and you say, well, there's that old style attitude to that. Whereas, and then 5 minutes later they're watching X-Men or whatever, and everything is, super digital, bloody, bloody, blah. So it is a kind of challenge, that, because you kind of go, will people go with it? And, will people just suspend their disbelief and enter this world, I suppose? And that was always our worry, which is, I guess why we were so keen to digitize them. But Marnix did a fine job, I think, but God bless him. And he will never climb inside a golden suit again, I can promise you that.
And what was it like working with the rest of the cast, like Richard Coyle and David Suchet and Claire Foy?
Well, of course, I suppose they're all very different. Claire Foy is gorgeous, wonderful woman, very funny, sharp, smart, also from the Chilterns, strangely. And, there was some comment recently about funny women that got someone fired or something. I can't remember who it was. The ex-CEO of Disney or something, I can't remember. It was recently in the papers. Anyway, Claire Foy is a funny woman, and she's also beautiful. And she's also very generous and down to earth, and I loved working with Claire. David Suchet is he's very established in the UK, and I had seen David Suchet because he was Poirot for years and years and years and years. But before he did that, he did this show called Blot on the Landscape, which is a Tom Sharp novel, where he played this crazy character of Blot, who was this kind of German, strange, crazy character. I don't know if you know the Tom Sharp books. Tom Sharp is a sort of, I guess he's a 70s precursor in some ways to Terry Pratchett, sort of satirical, and it's not really true, but Terry really quite liked his books because they were crazy. And so he'd done that sort of thing. So David sort of knew about the sort of theatricality that was sort of required with this kind of project, and the kind of that, not tongue-in-cheekness, but that sort of fun, I suppose, playfulness. And he was delightful. He's very, he's just an amazing actor, very professional, very studied, very prepared, and a very, very kind man, actually. So that was a pleasure, because I'd never worked with him before, and he's an actor in Britain that comes with a lot of weight, because he's done an awful lot on stage and whatever. But he was super generous, and he had a lot of fun, I think. I think everyone had a lot of fun in Budapest. And he had a lot of fun playing the character. Richard Coyle is a very funny man as well. Also, in some ways, quite sort of takes it very, very seriously. But has a super wit to him. And he had it. I mean, God, I tell you, he had his challenges. He had to wear a gold suit. And if you wear leather in real heat and you're not allowed to take it off because you're filming, you start to literally cook. And at times, Richard was dying. It was awful. It was like, get the suit back on. Do I have to wear the hat? Yes, you have to wear the hat. But he was really very dedicated to the character. He loved the character of Moist von Lipwig, because Moist von Lipwig was all into disguises, and early on in the film, he got to play lots of different people, very briefly, just for sort of one or two scenes where he played Albert Spangler, or he played this character and that character, and he loved the whole kind of theatricality of that and the dressing upness of that, as just making those little characters come alive for 15, 20 seconds or whatever it was. So yeah, he was like Miss Crisplock was just is a really good friend, and she's also a scream to be with. Episodes, that's what it's called. Yeah. Very funny woman again, and beautiful. There you go. We had Charles Dance, who I've worked with a few times, and I love Charles. He's kind of tells great stories, has all that authority, goes away again, says a joke. He's a great guy, Charles Dance, and really game for things. There's a guy called Steve Pemberton who played Drumknot, who is a bit of a god in the UK, a bit of a comedy god. I couldn't believe it when we asked him to do it, and I was staggered that he said yes, because he did a thing called the League of Gentlemen, and they do this very, very funny comedy show called League of Gentlemen, all set in Royston Basey, and that is a huge cult, I think, in the UK. And he continues to do, fantastic hysterical work. We were very lucky with all these kind of rather wonderful actors who I think kind of just loved playing these larger than life characters. We had Andrew Sachs, who again, you see, Andrew Sachs is a bit of a kind of comedy god, because he was in Fawlty Towers as Manuel for only for 12 episodes, but that's so kind of significant in British culture. Fawlty Towers, you cannot underestimate how Fawlty Towers just goes on and on and on, and how much we love it. And so on.
Do you have any other particularly memorable stories that sort of pop into your mind from your time on set?
No, that's a tricky one. There were a lot of things going on. It was a very, very busy shoot. There was this hilarious moment where we were going to do this, Sky were doing this big launch, and they were trying to get the song Return to Sender, Return to Sender, to do some sort of promotion, and they couldn't do it or whatever. And one day, extraordinarily, the Golem and Moist von Lipwig and Stanley of the Pins went off, and we made our own version. I wonder if it's on YouTube. Made our own version of Return to a Sender, and because Marnix the Golem was a dancer, they did this amazing. Just one lunchtime, they did this amazing dance to Return to Sender for Sky. Sky never aired it, actually. But it was a kind of show where everyone was sort of up for things, constantly up for things, doing, just adding into the world that it was. There was amazing dedication, actually. There was one day when the race was on, and they were going out to ride across the plains, and huge numbers of Terry Pratchett fans turned up from Britain and all got dressed up and whatever, and that sort of thing is golden in a way, and they all sat in the crowd and jumped up and down and did all their thing, and you can't sort of buy that really, where you've got that kind of enthusiasm on a daily basis that you're just trying to capture, I suppose. And I suppose it was one of those in one's life occasion. You have beautiful summers sometimes, and apart from the fact that it was very hot, it was beautiful, beautiful summer. And it just seemed that every day we would be out filming this extraordinary weather in these extraordinary places, getting lost in the post office. We actually filmed in this extraordinary fort on the banks of the Danube that if you walked into it, you could get lost. You really could. It was totally out of Terry Pratchett's world. It was with miles and miles and miles of passages that would all connect in bizarre ways, and were meant to kind of, I suppose, if you were some naughty kind of, I don't know what you'd be. Would you be a Russian or something invading Austro-Hungarian Empire? You'd end up in these passages and just walk until you died. If you ever go to Hungary, you should go to this fort. It's an absolute, it's absolutely extraordinary. It goes for miles and miles and miles. The corridors, we didn't have CGI in these corridors because they just were that long. So when you've got a whole unit kind of going around in this, and the Hungarians, who were lovely, would turn up with their picnics and their model planes, weirdly, and they would fly their model planes, and we'd go and get lost in these huge tunnels, and that would be our days. It was beautiful. Strange things that happened. I can't. Horses were naughty all the time. People nearly falling off horses constantly, which was sort of not funny, but also sort of kind of funny. And I think one of the things where I realised that we had an amazing team is that actually on the post office there is this little sign that actually is referenced in the book, which no one would ever see, which is a reference to, and I cannot remember the name of the character actually, who would be very cross. But that sort of detail on everything made it extraordinary. And one day I took my kids to the set, and the set really did have, thousands and thousands of letters, and they were all addressed. And just walking through this extraordinary set full of letters for my kids, and one of my kids just picked up this letter and said, "Look, Dad, there's a letter here for you." And it was. There was one of the detail that they'd gone into, and of course they had to have addresses, so they were just sort of choosing anybody's addresses. But that level of kind of love that went into it was, just golden, really golden. But I tell you, actually shooting this sort of thing, your memory gets totally wiped. It's just constantly, every day, there's so much going on.
What did you think of the finished product?
Well, I kind of, there's too much love in me for it to do anything but love it, I suppose. When it was aired in the UK, it was much loved actually, because it's a kind of, I could never really decide. Once, when we were making it, someone said to me, "So, who's this meant for? What's the audience for this?" And I said, "Well, it's for the sort of 13-year-old in all of us." And I kind of stand by that. And when it was aired, it was aired on, I think it was Easter. Yeah, I think it was Easter when it first went out. And it was aired at Easter when everyone would have been kind of, full of food, but it wasn't too late, but it was probably dark outside. It was kind of 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or something like that. And there was a lovely review that said, this thing is full of goodness and wit and fun and all those kind of things, and and being mean about it at your peril. Because I think, I'm kind of, I'm aware, I suppose, of what we did and how tricky it was to do and what we achieved for so little, I suppose. And by the same token, I'm sort of aware that there is a version of Going Postal that is enormous, that is much bigger, that is digital and, all those kind of things. But I suppose, coming from that sort of era in the UK when we made Doctor Who and everything was a little bit sort of wobbly. I embrace all that, and I embrace the kind of the way that we did it, which was not Fantastic Four-ish, Superman-ish, whatever. And I think in some ways it belongs to a world or an attitude that I think Terry is sort of familiar with, in a sense, is that we did it with love, and at the end of it, I felt that those people who were going to come to it with that kind of that generosity, I suppose, and that desire to kind of enter that world would love it, and I think they did. And it's the only thing I ever did that my kids actually like, and that's that's enough for me in some ways, So it's one of the things I've done that holds I have a huge soft spot for, and I don't kind of worry about the edges, I suppose, because I know what we meant.
Are you working on anything currently that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'm sort of at the moment I'm working for the Americas. I'm sort of doing some American TV shows which are very fast and furious, actually. I'm just about to go and do Heroes Reborn, which is interesting, actually. And Heroes Reborn actually is the sort of thing that, although I haven't started yet, I'm doing the finale of it. And that's a lot of fun. I mean, that's a slicker piece of thing, but I kind of I love the Heroes Reborn and Going Postal have very little in common, apart from I suppose an excitement about them, and a kind of an energy and an awe. And actually I think Tim Kring is a lovely writer, and I love what he says about the world and what we are, and strangely it kind of chimes a bit, because ultimately there's that sense of, yes, we can be heroes and all that sort of thing, but there's also such a sort of reference to just the really, really, really simple emotions of fathers and daughters, lovers, friends, that kind of thing, and that in those stories always tops, if you like, gold and all that sort of stuff. So, but I think that'll be a lot of fun, because in a way, I know I've been working with Adam Armus and Kay Foster on the last thing they did, which is American Odyssey, and we talked a lot about heroes. And just how, on a different level, I think, because obviously American television has considerably more resources than British television, or certainly did and generally does. But what I loved about talking to them is again, heroes, they had to be so inventive constantly. And I think actually the great thing about heroes is they pull it off, pretty much most of the time. But just that inventiveness with material and how to, in a sense, do superheroes without the huge caravans and flying through the air and Spider-Man mission off things. So that's going to be interesting. So I'm off to Toronto in a few weeks to do that. Yeah.
All right, so big thanks to Jon Jones for sitting down and talking with us about Going Postal. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the plot. It's hard to explain.
I mean, it's a 3-hour made-for-TV miniseries.
Right, based off of what I'm assuming is a 200-plus page book.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that goes into it.
But Moist von Lipwig is a con man, and he cons people out of their money through various ways.
Eventually causing a depression.
Right. Because he's conning so many people out of their money. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, he draws the attention of Lord Vetinari, who gives him an option of either dying or becoming the postman for the post office that's on the rocks.
Yeah, because the post office was run by the government, and then Richard Gilt set up the clacks, or no, he didn't set up the clacks. A guy named...
confusing.
Yeah, a guy named Deerhart set up the clacks, but Richard Gilt runs it at the time of the movie. And Richard Gilt runs the clacks, and nobody wants to use the post office because it's slower, but the clacks is now run by a capitalist, overly greedy sort of dickbag.
Right.
And so the class sucks. And so Vetinari makes Lipwig reopen the post office to provide competition. But the post office is haunted.
Right. And that's like the basic plot.
Right.
But there's so many interworking parts that are going on.
Right. There's Pump 19, who's a golem that's Richard Coyle's parole officer. There's Adorabella Deerhart, played by Claire Foy, who's the daughter of the guy that originally started the Clacks, who was sort of
driven out of business because of Moist von Lipwig.
Right, because of Moist von Lipwig's cons. And she's trying to get the Clacks back from Richard Guilt with her plans. Then you've got, Drumknot. Is it Drumknot? No, hang on. And then you've got all the little subplots going on with the secondary characters. You've got...
There's a lot going on.
Right. I mean...
There's more going on than I think we could sit and talk about.
Mm-hmm. And definitely not in any detail.
Right. And, the plot is confusing and it goes all over the place. But I think even as someone who has no experience with the source material, I understood it. And I wasn't sitting confused throughout the entirety of the film.
Because
there is stuff that I've watched that is like that.
Mm-hmm. Where it's super complicated and you're not able to follow it.
Yeah.
But Going Postal does a good job of providing exposition.
Right. Yeah, giving a lot of good exposition.
Without making it feel like a droning lecture.
Right. What did you think of the performances?
I think they're great. All the way down to Ingrid Bolso Berdahl, who played Sergeant Angua, the werewolf cop that's in 2-3 scenes. Everybody does a great job, and it probably helps that I really like the characters. But, in that interview that we had with Jon Jones, he talks about what Richard Coyle had to go through with his costume, how they got Pump 19 to be an effective special effect. So much work went into this movie on everybody's part. I don't know if there's anybody that I would go, yeah, they weren't great.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, not having any experience with these characters and knowing whether or not it's, a faithful adaptation of the character or not, but I liked the character. I really like Richard Coyle as Moist von Lipwig. He's a very charismatic actor, I think, just on the surface. And you want to see him succeed. I also really liked Charles Dance as Lord Vetinari. But then again, Charles Dance is pretty much great in everything I've ever seen him in.
Right.
So I don't think it's hard for me to sit and sing the praises of Charles Dance. Jesus, he was in Last Action Hero, and he was awesome in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And David Suchet as Richard Guilt was pretty great as kind of the scheming bad guy as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just, I feel like there's so much going on with Going Postal, it's almost a disservice for us to try and explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is so much going on.
Right, because even even Grote, played by Andrew Sachs, Stanley, played by Ian Bernard, these secondary characters also have their own little plots that all end up fixing into the main storyline, like Stanley's pin collection that helps the group make stamps better, Grote and his age and seniority and the fact that he's been in the post office forever, bringing in the old school employees to get back to delivering mail. All of it, everybody's got something happening that all ends up coming back to the climax.
And it's so hard to talk about that.
Right, because there's so much.
Because this isn't real. This is like two movies together.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And as we've said before, it's hard to talk about good movies, and it's harder still to talk about good movies that are complicated.
Right. This is a movie that if you're a fan of kind of steampunk, magical realism, you need to go out and check it out. I would say that this is definitely something worth watching, even if you've never heard anything about the Terry Pratchett source material, but you're a fan of British humor and stuff like that, you need to check this out.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, John, skip it or watch it, and best performance.
I'm definitely going to go with watch it. Even though I don't know if it's for everybody just because it is a little bit odder than the standard movie that comes out of Hollywood, I still think that most people would enjoy it. It's like a more focused and positive Monty Python, sort of.
It's got more heart than Monty Python. Mm-hmm. Monty Python, a lot of it was played for comedy.
Right, and there's a lot more of a sort of a focus on telling a story, but it's got the same sort of exaggerated style and sort of, the dry humor.
Right.
So I think a lot of people would like Going Postal, and not to mention the other ones, which are also good.
And I'm going to definitely have to check those out, for me at least, personally.
Right. Best performance is hard. I think I want to give it to David Suchet. I think his Reach Your Guilt is intimidating without being, scary. He does a good job of sort of standing up to the governmental authority that's currently in place and still coming off as the bad guy.
Right. I agree. Yeah, he's the bad guy, but it's not really. You're just cheering against him because of who he is.
Uh-huh.
And the positioning of Moist von Lipwig against him.
I mean, to be fair, he did have, multiple people killed.
That's true.
So he's totally a bad guy. It's just interesting to see a character that's written to go against the government. Nowadays, a lot of character arcs that are, I'm anti-government, are usually seen in a fonder light.
As for me, I'm going to say watch it. Again, this has kind of lit the fire under my ass to go out and check out more of Terry Pratchett's stuff, his books. And, I had been kind of on the fence about it, but watching Going Postal, thanks to John, has really convinced me to go out and read more of his books. And I'm normally not a huge fan of fantasy, but fantasy and comedy seems to work. At least in Terry Pratchett's hands. And if this is as funny as it was, I'm assuming his books are even better.
Mm-hmm.
Best performance, I'm going to go with Richard Coyle as Moist von Lipwig. He's just so charismatic, and he plays the kind of good straight man because he's kind of the straight man in this crazy world,
right?
Of the post office, and I really like that. And he, because of this film, he actually is going to show up, hopefully, in October for a film that he did called Grabbers, which is a Irish monster film. And I know that that's probably going to end up making our list. But John, is there anything you want to plug?
My Twitter is John Lein1. We got more Kulturecast on the way, always on the way. One after the other. Keep watching them, listening to them. And Chronicles from the Crypt is a weekly Tales from the Crypt retrospective that Chris and I do, and that's cool. And also, there are 2 Discworld video games out. Well, the second one came out in 1996. I have to see if I can find a copy.
Good luck.
Yeah, eBay for $1,000.
Good luck hunting those down. I don't even have a disk drive in my computer. So.
Really?
I know. My desktop, I don't have a disk drive.
Wow.
I just have. I don't have I couldn't hook it up with the power cord because I already have too many power cords going to my hard drives. So I don't have a disk drive in my goddamn computer. So if you find them, let me know how they are. I'm sure they're probably good. Hopefully. As for me, you can follow me on Twitter at Kulturestash. And John already covered all the bases about other stuff we do. This Thursday, we're going to be talking about The 13th Warrior, a adaptation of a Michael Crichton book by the name of The Eaters of the Dead. We also spoke with Dennis Storhoy, who was in the film, and we have 2 guest co-hosts. No, we don't. And we have 1 guest co-host, so make sure to check that one out.